Hi, Peter Newhouse here, and I'm delighted to be with Dennis Paalman today. And we're going to get to know a little bit more about Dennis by asking him 20 questions about being a reward professional. So, welcome, Dennis. Nice to be here with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, our show, I think we should call it. So, Dennis, just to give you a bit of an idea of what's coming, I've got some questions. I've got 20 questions for you, and they're really separated into five parts.
Right.
First one is about your own personal journey in reward, and before we get on to that, I'm going to introduce you a little bit. The second part is really around the reward proposition. Third piece is about your own reward. So we're going to be asking you a little bit about how you feel about getting paid yourself. Fourth piece is around the future of reward. And then we're going to finish off with what I call words of wisdom. And
Right.
just so that you're well prepared for that piece, got a bit of a chance to think about it, I'm going to ask you at the end sort of what's the best piece of advice you've ever received about reward, and also the best bit of advice you've given about reward. I'm going to ask you that at the end. So you need to have a little time to consider those things. But before we get going, Dennis, let me tell our listeners a little bit about you. You're very much an experienced global reward professional, currently working in Abu Dhabi for 30 Globe. You're also at the same time chair of GEO. I think that's your tenure is coming to an end. You can tell us a little bit about that while we're talking. You're also chair of a Dutch network of global heads of rewards for AEX listed companies, which is fantastic. And previously you were with Bayer. You've got a fantastic CV. Global head of reward is all over it. Solvay, Signify, the lighting company of Philips, Ahold, the big retailer, ING, the big Dutch bank, Towers, Perrin as a consultant. And I think you started off earlier than that with IBM. So you've got a fabulous CV and a really long history in reward. And so a perfect person to ask 20 questions to. And rather than allowing you to introduce yourself, I'm going to kick straight off with a question. So, in terms of your own personal journey, I'm really curious to know what first got you involved in reward. Why reward? What happened? How did you get involved in it?
Well, that's a very good question because for me, it makes perfect sense how I moved from not being a reward person to being a reward person. But for most people, they don't really understand because from education, I'm a mechanical engineering with an MBA. And as most people, I started in the mid 90s as a project manager for IBM, and I implemented ERP systems, which means enterprise resource planning. Basically, you analyze a production process and make sure that you have all the resources at the right time, at the right place, in the right quantity, at the right price. That went very well. And at one point, working at IBM, they asked me whether I wanted to be a manager of 80 of such consultants at IBM. Now, if you implement that kind of software, you have all kinds of modules. Could be supply chain, could be procurement, could be anything. But let's assume that you would work for me in those days. Yeah, and people like Peter would come to me and say, I have now implemented the module supply chain for 15,000 times and I'm bored with it. I would like to do something else. So I would send you on a course. You would learn about supply chain. You'd come back super happy. And then a week later, you would say, thank you for the education. I'm off to Accenture, which was a bit of a problem because every time I developed people, they wandered off to my competition. So I had a chat with my boss who said, like, have you told Peter that he's eligible for a bonus? I said, no, I didn't, because I didn't even know we had a bonus system. And if I don't know, I cannot explain it to Peter. He said, it's even worse because I know we have one and I don't know how it works. I said, oh, awesome. So within this company, we are purely relying on a system that people either don't know about and those that do know about don't understand. He said, that is basically it. So he asked me to have a read of the project, of the plan document, which I did. And this is IBM, so it was a very thick binder. And after reading it, I thought, I cannot tell head nor tail. I don't understand why Peter has to do what he needs to do, what he gets when he does it, and why that is important for IBM that we do that. So I went back to my boss. He said, well, that's exactly my take. And then I thought, why don't I talk to companies that actually design incentive plans like Mercer, Towers at the time, Hay. And when I talked to them, I said, why do you make these plans so complicated? They say, it's not complicated. It's tax efficient and legally sound. I said, that doesn't mean anything because I need to explain to Peter what he needs to do, why that is important for the company, and what he will get if he does it. They said, we don't know what you're talking about, so why does he come and work for us? And so I ended up with Willis Towers Watson in London in their executive compensation practice. And that's how I got into reward.
Very interesting. And I think it mirrors a lot of experiences that not many people become reward professionals by design or purpose. It's
That's
something
right.
you kind of come across a little bit by accident. But I'm very curious, Dennis. If you think back on those days when you first, and you explained that very well. How have your views of reward developed over the years? Is there are there things that you now see differently? What looks the same as it did then, and what does look different now?
Well, if I look back, and that's a long way back, I have the impression, I think when I roll into the reward function, I think right before that, payroll or reward was seen as payroll plus. Reward took care of the payments. And right when I started, there was some legal constraints on how much base salary could be. There were shareholders that asked for skin in the game. So all of a sudden, there was this high demand of equity-based programs. Everybody wanted to have shares, options, and what have you. And I think Reward sailed on that wave. And we went from people that were in the back office taking care of payments and we became the magicians because all of a sudden we could attract talent, we could retain talent, we could motivate people, we could take care of overall general happiness of the employees. And I don't say that's true, but I had the impression that many people in the organization, senior management predominantly, had the impression that with money and rewards, compensation, benefits, you could do anything. And if you would have had a reward, you therefore could do anything.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah. Do you find your work in reward meaningful, Dennis?
Well, what I find interesting, because if you do an MBA and you're an engineer, you basically have a very broad education. So when I now talk to people that I haven't seen for quite a while, they say, how did you end up in this specialistic role? It's even a sub role in HR. And then I wonder, a specialist role, that is interesting because in order for a head of reward and his team to design an effective incentive plan, whether long or short, you really have to understand the business, what makes this company tick. If you look at what ING Bank see as their value drives and you compare that to a food retailer or Philips, these are completely different companies. So first of all, you need to understand the strategy. You need to understand what drives this company. And then you have to understand, so what kind of people do we need? And then you can think, how do we design our incentive philosophy so that we can attract and retain these people? And once you've done that, you have to talk to basically all functions in the organization. You have to talk to communication, finance, treasury, legal, HR, procurement, IT, and they all have different preferences. They have all different needs. They have their own solutions. And then you have to sit down with all of them to make sure that you marry their demands with what you think is the best design, which means that you have to have conversation with people in treasury asking them, so what are your thoughts about hatching this plan? And then they look at you like, hang on, you're from HR, you're not even supposed to understand the word hatching. And for me, that is the beauty of being in rewards because you need to be able to talk to every one of them. So more or less comparable with the problem is a pizza. We divide the pizza in all kinds of parts. We give every function their own slice of pizza, and they all come back with a solution. And we have to put the whole pizza together to make sure we have a solution that helps your organization to attract and retain their talents.
Really interesting. Yeah, I often think that reward really sits on that crossroads between so many other aspects of the business, so many other professionals in the business,
Exactly.
and we have a pretty unique view on what's going on, which is really fascinating. But you must face a lot of challenges in your role too. So, That's in a way you've just described some of the positive sides of it, but there must be challenges that come with it as well. What kind of challenges do you face in your role?
Well, first of all, there's three probably. One is find good reward people because, as you said, there's not a university where you can learn about reward. So you have to figure out if you want to put your reward team together. I might need somebody with a bit of a legal background or a tax background, and then you have to mold that whole team into a team that you consider to be the best possible reward team that you can find. So it's not always easy to find reward talent. That's one. The other challenge I usually have is that everybody is an expert in reward. So if I talk to senior people, they rarely tell me what the challenge is they're facing. They usually tell me what they think the solution is because it works so well at Unilever. It's yes, but you're not at Unilever now. You are at ING Bank. So the challenge is to listen and respect what they think the solution is, and then very slowly and carefully try to at least toss some potential alternatives on the table until you actually have found a solution, or better yet, you have made them come up with a solution for the challenge they actually have. And that's a very delicate process because you don't necessarily deal with people that have a lot of patience, especially if they think if I tell you what the solution is because I believe that's the best solution. They don't usually tolerate people that say, could be, but perhaps there are some alternatives we can consider. So that is usually a bit of a challenge. And a lot of companies still are very, well, trying to hang on to what we consider these are solutions from the 60s. If you still implement appraisal systems in a 1 to 5 scale to make sure that you can actually assess people's performance like General Electric did in the 60s, and you think it works still now, it's a bit of a challenge to explain. There's no evidence it ever worked. So why would you actually invest so much money in implementing a system that doesn't work?
Well, that does sound like a bit of a challenge indeed. Yeah, and I'm sure we could really talk about that one for quite a lot longer, but I'm going to move on a little bit because, also the way you're describing your role, you have quite a lot of influence and it's pretty wide ranging. So you definitely have an opportunity to what I'd call make a difference. So, what kind of opportunities do you have to really make a difference, and what kind of difference could it be?
Um, well, you say that we have that power. I'm not sure that the rest of the organization acknowledges the fact that we do have that power because we have so many, um, well, myths that we have to bust before we can actually get to a solution that we think that works. Some of the things that we probably will talk about a bit later. But even if we have impact on the organization, it is rarely that people come to us and say, well, you know why we were so successful? Because we had an excellent bonus system, or we had the best long term incentive plan ever designed. So the impact that we have is probably there, but it's not always related back to us, unless things really go bad, and then it's definitely because of what we have designed or implemented. But for me, it's more if we have a unit in the organization or bigger parts of the organization where we really manage to attract the people that we need. And I am very specifically not saying talent because I don't really think that that's a relevant term in this. But if a company says, well, we would like to change our strategy, like we had with Bayer, for example, where they said, well, we used to have people that would sell fertilizers to farmers, but our new strategy is that we would like to co-work with farmers to increase the yield of the land. So to work with farmers together to make sure that we time the harvesting properly, know exactly when we have to put in fertilizers and how much. That basically means that you have to move from people selling fertilizers to data analysts and software engineers that work together with farmers with an agricultural background to see how they can help each other to increase the quality of crops or the volume. And if you then figure out how we can best hire these people, and you hire these people and they stay, and then the business as well, you really were supportive to our new strategy, I think that is something that is really nice to see.
Yeah, so you can really make a difference to the organisation's ability to achieve its objectives and so on and so forth in
Right.
a pretty meaningful way. Um, Now, reward, originally mechanical engineer, that's quite a step change. In some ways it isn't, because of course, in my view, reward is all about structure, and I find that fascinating. You clearly do too, and reward played a very big role in your career, because you chose it and you stayed with it. But there's a couple of aspects to my next question, which is really around how reward has shaped your career, because you've obviously learned a lot as you've gone through. So tell us a little bit about that. How reward has shaped your career.
Well, besides the fact that reward gives you the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to have a discussion with all kinds of different functions within the organization, it's also not only cross function, it's also cross level, it is cross everything. Um, you're allowed to work with the most senior people in the organization, whether that are supervisory board member or non-execs or the execs themselves, which I think is terrific to understand how these people think and work. Um, then you have to be a great listener. You have to be very modest when you operate at those levels, very sensitive. Um, but if you work with people deeper in the organization, I think it is great to be able to figure out what is important to them or to their function and learn about that. And the other thing, if you have to put a reward team together and you manage to develop people to be good reward professional, so develop your team members, I think that's one of the most rewarding things I could possibly do. So it have not only allowed me to learn a lot, it has opened the opportunity to meet people like yourself through all the networks we have throughout the world, because I think reward people are a bit strange people. They're a bit odd within the HR function. They're seen as odd because they do use spreadsheets and can understand data and information, which is not necessarily something that most people in HR do. So we kind of cling on to each other and help each other out. So I think I have had the opportunity to meet such interesting people around the world. It opened opportunities for me to lecture at universities, which I really enjoy. So for me, I sometimes when I teach at universities, they ask me, "So what do I need to do to get your job?" I said, "I don't know. I don't even know how I ended up here." So yes, these are things I think are things that have really shaped my career and my being as a human being.
Yeah, very interesting and very well expressed, if I may say so. Yeah, reward's quite a fascinating place, and you're very much a reward community person. In many of the things that you've done, you've helped to build the community of reward professionals, and give them a bigger sense of belonging to our profession. Um, I'm also very curious in terms of, you've gained a lot of experience. I mean, how would you now describe the scope of reward? You've already said quite a lot about how extensive it can be, but can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of how you would, define the scope of reward now that you've had all this experience?
Well, I think if anything, the scope of reward has expanded, and I do understand many organizations better understand why we have the function of reward and what it does for us. I think I had a very interesting discussion not too long ago when I worked at a company where I asked the CFO, why is reward not reporting into the finance function? He said, why would you report to me? What can I bring to the table that can help you and your reward work? I said, well, quite frankly, if I look at the org chart, IT reports to you, and I don't think you are an expert in that area, but you probably have IT reporting into you because they spend a lot of money usually. And if I look at our balance sheet, and I look at our wage sum and I look at our on and off balance sheet liabilities related to our benefit systems, if I would be a CFO, I would really be interested how that money is spent. And he said, well, it's a fascinating thing. So I think I don't think we are the magicians. I think we are the people that can ask really relevant questions. In some of the roles I had, I was also responsible, for instance, for HR risk. And that would mean if you have a company that wants to expand in a certain region or whatever, you do have to ask the questions like, what kind of people do you need for that expansion? How many people do you need? And when do you need them? Because I think usually the expansion of the organization is driven by the availability of the talent and competencies that we need to facilitate that. And I would like to know upfront what I need to do to help our recruiters to make that happen. And that is something that is usually not necessarily identified until somebody brings up that question. So I think one of our main tasks within the organization is not question everything, but to ask the right questions to make sure that the organization has a bigger probability of being successful.
Yeah, really good. Um, Dennis, we're now going to turn to something slightly different, and it's really more around the reward proposition itself. So this is our sort of second phase of questions. And I'd really like to start with the idea of top talent. Often in HR organizations, there's quite a big emphasis on this. I call them the people with the special sauce that make your company successful, the ones that are considered to be the top talent. And I was
Hmm.
just wondering, from your experience, which aspect of reward do you think is most important for top talent?
This might be a bit controversial, but I don't think there's anything that we do in reward that's relevant for retaining top talent. And I know most senior people like to be associated with their top talents. They would like to have their high potentials to come over and have a barbecue on the summer night to have very high level conversations. I think the thing is, your best talents, they don't need anything. They'll find their way in your organization. They're not interested in a 3% salary increase. They are interested in a career. They're interested in projects where they can be exposed to senior people to show how good they are. So, assuming that you have a relatively well thought out remuneration policy and you have relatively well balanced out and effective incentive plans, I do understand it's more sexy to have your focus on talents, but I think you should have your focus on the mighty middle, as we usually refer to that. These are the 90% of your employees that come to work every day and work really hard and actually keep the company afloat. And I think if you can increase the performance of these people with 1%, you probably have to hire a number of accountants additionally to count the money that you're earning. And that's, I think, very interesting how companies also say we need more talent, we need more high potentials. There's only a certain level of high potentials and talents you can actually facilitate because you don't want to bore them. You need to be able to facilitate their development path, their career, because otherwise you'll invest a lot in them and they will simply leave. So I don't really agree with this war for talent. I assume there's a war for employees. But talent, first, it's rare, and
Okay, but then let's talk about the mighty middle. Let's
right.
focus on the mighty middle. So, what's important to the mighty middle? In terms of reward. Well, what do you think kind of works for them?
I think what works for them is well recognition, autonomy, giving them not the impression because it sounds a bit negative, but we need managers that can explain to people why they are important. And I have seen systems where, for example, the merit increase, so the annual salary increases, the budget was set, and then if you wanted to give your talents more, you would have to take that away from the mighty middle. So that total cohort of people, and they know, uh, and even if you reduce their increase with a zero point 0.1 percent point, because you have to finance the increase to your talents, you really create a problem because these people have to work for these talents. And then they think, okay, so part of my salary increase I had to give back to finance you. And most talents do not necessarily stay in the same department for 5 to 10 years. They hop jobs. And if the word is out that your talent, blah, 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 people don't want to work for these talents. And then these talents seem to be less successful or performing less because of a system that we invented in rewards. So I think if you really want to be successful as an organization, you have to make sure that the people, the mighty middle people, are recognized and are properly compensated. And if you want to do something extra for your talents, do it extra and not on the expense of your mighty middle, because they will notice and they will not tell you. They will just like work less hard. They will probably extend their coffee breaks, not because they don't like their work, but because they don't feel recognized. And I think that is the key point. And that's what I like when you talk to companies like Work Human, where they say recognition is not something that is done in pay. It's not something that you do once per year. Recognition is a tap on the back. Recognition is sending this person an email back saying, hey, the memo you wrote for me the other day, I used in a board meeting and it was very, very well received and I could not have done it without you. That is recognition and that is respect. And I think if we give the middle that respect and recognition, you'll be good. I think that would be very, very good for your organization.
Very interesting. Now, look, you described reward people as magicians in some respects, and I'm going to give you a little magic wand right now, and I'm going to say, look, if you wanted to change, if you could change one thing in the reward proposition, and we're talking very generally, if you could change something in the reward proposition, what would it be if you had a magic wand?
Well, it would be very nice if our reward colleagues, can focus on reward issues instead of doing managerial work for people that manage people. So um, I think in one of the conference we both attended, I stated it would be great if we, as the reward function, could just disappear because we were not needed anymore. I don't necessarily mean that, but it feels a bit strange sometimes if I work for a very big multinational and I have to have a conversation with a very senior leader and say, well, for your I don't know, business unit, you have £200,000 budget for the merit increase. This is the distribution curve we have in mind. This is the system that you have to use to fill it in. This is who has to approve all the things you put in. And then they look at me and say, okay, and once I'm done with it, you trust me with a budget of 1.5 billion to invest in a big project without anyone asking questions. And I feel so ridiculous. I think like, what am I doing here? I'm telling a very senior manager how he has to reward his people. Why don't can I just not say, Peter, this is your budget. I assume you know your people. I assume you know your talents. I assume you know where they are in salary bands and why we have them. If not, more than happy to help you. I'm sitting right over there. My door is always open, but I leave this to you. And if I could do that, that would allow us in the reward function to focus on real issues that the organization is facing in very specific areas. So if I could change anything, I'd love to be able to do that. Give the trust and control and the autonomy back to the people that we entrust with that same autonomy and trust when it comes to any other topic, unless it's about the pay of people, which I find strong there.
Well, that's really fascinating. I mean, I want to ask you on the other side of the coin a little bit. What do you think generally employers are getting right about reward? I mean, something must be working because people do enough of it.
Well, what they do get right is they think that we are responsible for paying their people, and that's what we do. Um, I think their perception of that is accurate. Um, Certain things, as mentioned earlier, we are not responsible for retaining people. Uh, I think it's a job. It's not even for HR, and I think you know the expression. People join the organization for perhaps pay, for the mission, the purpose, and everything, but they leave the organization because of the manager. And I think we have to help managers to be better managers, because the problem that I see very often is that people are promoted in a managerial role, on Friday, and then they show up at work and they all of a sudden have a team of 20, 30, 60, 100 people. And then they said, okay, now what? And they don't have a clue. We simply assume that once you become a manager, you have developed all the skills that you need to have as a manager. I haven't seen a lot of companies, and I don't know about you, where they say, well, before you step into this role, we will give you, I don't know, a 7-day crash course on HR related elements that you need to incorporate in your style as a manager. This is what is relevant for the development of your people. This is relevant if you want to talk about pay. This is why we have a grading system. So just things to make them better managers, because we cannot design incentive systems or reward philosophy that will compensate for incompetent management. That's impossible to do.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Um, you've talked a bit about what you change in the reward proposition generally, and
Mm.
and giving more autonomy, responsibility, accountability to managers to manage stuff that they should be capable of managing themselves is very much part of that. But is there anything else specifically in the reward proposition that you think currently employers are getting wrong? And I certainly take the point you made about managers needing to manage and take responsibility for it. But what about the reward proposition itself? Is there something in there which really doesn't work that well? Do you think?
Well, I don't know whether it doesn't work well because we didn't necessarily have to find what we think is the definition of it's working well. However, I do think that we, not you and I, but the reward function in general, are really on a crossroad now where I think up till now we were a bit of arrogant people. We thought, well, I think we know what people want. We rarely asked the employees, what is it actually that you want? We said, I think they need a base salary, they need a bonus, they need LTI, a nice benefit system. But we rarely ask, are you happy with this? Is there anything you would like to change? And if we ask it in very general terms, because there's a limit to what we can do. But now, with the most recent developments with algorithms, with artificial intelligence, we might be at a point that we can ask people very specifically or make suggestions, depending on where they are in their career or in their life in general. Listen, you just had a child. We have many other people in this organization that went through that phase, believe it or not. And we have seen that some of your colleagues decided to change some certain things in their benefit package, which we have available. So we will give you some suggestions to really make sure you inform them better, help them time the changes better, and align what we offer better to what their needs are. And with that, get a bigger bang for our buck. And I think we have the data, we have the information, we have the philosophy, we know what works and doesn't work. We reward people have insight in that data that we have never been able to make accessible for all the employees. And I think we are at the point that we will be able to do that and will be able to use all that new technology to tailor our proposition to the individual employees without compromising on internal equity problems and things like that, because we can do that very transparent, very open. And differences in pay, I think, as such, is not a problem. It is a problem when you cannot explain it. And we can tailor it to somebody in China versus the US, somebody in India versus South Africa, which I think is something that really excites me for the next couple of years to see how that will unfold and whether we will be able to do an even better job in the reward function.
Well, that's great. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the future of reward and how you see that evolving in a few minutes' time. But before we get to that bit, I want to ask you about your own reward. And don't worry, we're not going to get too personal here. But I'd really like to start off by asking you, well, you personally, what do you value the most about your own current reward package? When you're looking at your own package, what is it in there that you particularly value yourself?
Well, I think it develops, Peter, because at the very start of your career, you are predominantly interested, I think, in base salary. You're looking for a house for your family. You want to get a mortgage. If you go to the bank, especially when I was younger, looking for a house, well, I do have a very interesting variable pay package. They're like, yes, whatever. We don't count that in the calculation of the amount of money that we are willing to loan you. So base salary in the early days is probably one of the biggest drivers when it comes to an element of your pay package. But eventually you start a family, you feel responsible for more people. So you tend to, I think, shift your things that you value more to different things. You at one point will start looking at how is my retirement plan organized in this organization? How about health insurance? How about life insurance? Um, and I think that's why we have to also in the reward function, even if you look to at yourself, only recognize that, hey, if these things change for me, I might even consider myself as a regular employee. These things might change for all the other people that work here as well. Um, so I think things change when you go older. And it also is very dependent on how your company is doing. What I mean by that is incentive plans, especially the long-term ones, are awesome if your company is doing really well, but not so nice if they're not really doing well. And when I started working at Royal Ahold a long time ago, before I joined that company, the company was growing ridiculously fast. So everybody jived in the whole share buying systems that they have. And then things went south and the share price plummeted from 33 euros per share to 2. And I don't think companies usually anticipate what that does to your culture. Because now we had employees that could all of a sudden not go on vacation, and then mom or dad had to explain, yes, because I invested in the shares of this company. And they are not necessarily appreciated at home for that. You create a problem internally because they will come to you, Peter, and say, well, you told me to buy these shares. And he said, no. In fact, you asked me whether I would invest in these shares, and I said yes. I didn't say that you had to invest in shares. So you create a lot of tension in the organization, which is not good.
Yeah, very interesting, and I'm sure you come across that a lot in something like Geo Global Equity Organization, where indeed, many of these plans are designed for success, but they're not really designed for those big
Well,
plans.
and I think that that relates back to the basic question that most reward professional, I hope, do ask when somebody comes to their desk with a great suggestion is like, what business problem are we solving with this? What is it you want this plan, this design to do for you? Um, because it might not be the best solution for the challenge that you have, and we might even be capable of coming up with something that works better.
Well, I'm
But
going to
that's
ask you
it.
about that specifically. So, if you again back a little bit back to the magic wand, if you now could create your own reward package, this is a dangerous question to ask a reward professional. But if you were able to design your own personal package, the Dennis package, what would it look like for Dennis as well? Not just for other people, but for yourself.
Um, well, I need to know, and I need to make sure that my base salary is relatively in line with the market, because reward only becomes a problem when it becomes a problem. So I need to be properly compensated. I don't necessarily think, no, I will probably, no, I'm damn sure I will not introduce a short-term incentive plan for myself because it doesn't work. I don't think it's the best bang for your buck. I would pour that money, perhaps for a part, into the base salary and for the majority in a recognition plan because I don't mind being recognized by a tap on the back, but a small financial element to that recognition, I think I would also appreciate. And I know not only for me, but a lot of people would really appreciate that, but not once a year. It should be very close to the achievement, to get some recognition. I do like long-term incentive plans, but I would make them perhaps even longer than they currently are, with a vesting that is, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Because I like to be part, or at least have the impression that I am seen as an employee that helps the organization to create value. And other what than most companies think that a long-term incentive plan is to retain talent. There's no evidence that it works. Unfortunately, there's more evidence that it doesn't work that way. It's probably easier and better to tell you people, Peter, you are now eligible for our long-term incentive plan because you are in a role that adds value to the organization. And the easiest way we can measure value created by this company is by measuring how the share price is doing. And when the share price goes up, we found a way to channel some of that created value back to the people that we think helped us create that value. And I think that is also a great way of recognizing people's performance over the longer term. So, solid base salary, not a bonus system. If anything should be short term variable, I would go for a profit sharing or a gain sharing plan that is for everybody. We're all in this together, and then the long term incentive because I think it gives me the impression that I have helped create value and I'm recognized for that.
Yeah, very good. Look, I'm going to try and answer the next question for you
Oh
because
dear.
you've already yeah, you've already talked quite a bit about this, and so I'm going to see if I can play it back to you, and you tell me whether I've got it about right. Um, it's really around how the things that you value in your package might have changed over time. And what I've heard you saying is that like a lot of people when you're younger, you value fixed pay more because you've got responsibilities. But what I hear you saying is that as you've matured and gained experience, you put more value on recognition, short-term recognition, being valued by your employer as a almost not just symbolic is the wrong word, but it's a very good symbol of their respect and the value they place in you. And at the same time, what you're kind of interested in and what you value more is long-term incentives because you feel that you can make a contribution to the success of the company with the work that you do, and if they're successful, you'd like to receive a good share of that. Does that sound about right?
That's pretty accurate, really. So it shows that you're a good reward professional, being good in listening and summarizing stuff, and then you probably come with the question, why?
And then I offer you something totally different, of course. Yeah, that's yes, that's normal. But yes, thank you for that because I think it's a very good theme that you've developed through the course of the questions. You know, that emphasis on value creation and recognition, and that people are different and that things do change over time. Let's turn a little bit towards the future of reward then. So, I mean, what does the future of reward look like to you? And if there are maybe three themes that you think are going to shape the future of reward, what would they be? And it doesn't have to be three; it can be
I'll give you six.
or
I'll
15.
give you three in bonus. So I think it's pretty much in line with what we discussed earlier, Peter. I think we will move into more personalized systems when it comes to pay components, pay elements, and recognition. I think we should help the organization to focus more on the well-being of the employees, not only whether they perform, but really are healthy. And I wouldn't necessarily say happy in their job because that's I think not always that easy. But we should make sure that we take into consideration that most employees actually are human beings who had also a life outside the organization. So if a person is not performing well, it might have to do with the fact that he or she is under financial stress. That might not be something caused by the work he or she does for your company, but something externally. Could be that she has social challenges or he has, I don't know, lost a relative. I think it is very important that we create a culture, an organization, or help to create a culture that understands that we are working human beings and educate our managers that their basic, most important role is to help their people to perform well, and that they have to do everything to facilitate that. And that means well-being should be a bit bigger topic, I think, in an organization reward. I think real-time recognition is important, so don't wait months and months to tell somebody he or she did a good job and gets a button for being the employee of 20 weeks ago. I think we have to figure out a way how we can link reward more to skills people bring to the table rather than education and experience only. So what is it actually that what you're doing now for us? I think we have to try to work with more agile and flexible reward systems where people have more of a say in how they would like to be compensated, um, while we at the same time prevent them to make funny choices that will not help them. Because it's not always that easy for us, but for employees also to understand what is the impact on my pension? Because for most people, that's years from now. But choices you make now can have a huge impact on those things. And I think we have to help to facilitate people to make the right choice, but do have to give them the freedom and autonomy to make those choices. And we should link reward more to the purpose of the company. And I think that's a big theme for most people that currently join organizations because they are interested in what is the purpose of this company. Why are we doing this? For whom are we doing this? And do we do that with a holistic share, not only share, but stakeholder view in mind? Do we serve all these people? Because we're not here to make profit only. We are here to be a good corporate citizen, and we have to, I think, align our reward systems. Sorry, to that. That was six.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's a good vision of the future. I think very humanistic, which I like. Now, in that kind of organization of the future, you've touched a little bit on this, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you think the role and skills of a reward professional will be, evolving, will be maybe different to the way that they are now.
Yeah, I think you're right, Peter. I think that we hopefully move towards a more data driven function. We can make up things like I think, or I assume, or we might want to do this, but we have so much data at our fingertips. We can actually ask people, we can analyze information or analyze data and turn it into information to help senior people to make better decisions. So I think, as with most jobs, the reward function will also change to fact-driven, data-driven function, where we can hopefully strip off the "I think this might work because I've seen this work 25 years ago when I joined this company" kind of statements. And I think that, yeah, so I think we will be more data-driven, more tailored, more factual, more scientific, really.
And in terms of like engaging, I mean, like you started off in a very interesting way describing how reward wasn't understood in the company that you started working for in a different capacity. And that curiosity as to, oh, what's this all about, kind of led you into the arena. And clearly, their way of engaging people in reward wasn't great. Now, how would you like to do it now, all these years later? When you really sort of, how would you really like to engage people to bring reward to life?
Well, I've noticed by just stating the facts will not help you do this. So, what really fascinates me the last couple of months when I listen to speakers or read books about storytelling and how you can perhaps use that technique to explain why you as a company or why you as a reward function do the things that you would like to do. Um, because there's always kind of a narrative, like what we just discussed on the long-term incentive. You can say, oh, well, in your new role, you get a 20% in base salary in shares. Good luck with that. Nobody understands this. But if you explain this by saying, like, well, I was about to say, you probably remember that, but I don't think you were around in those days, but probably in the 50s or 60s, they sold cars by saying, this new Chevrolet has an air conditioning and it will keep you cool in summer, whatever. We don't sell cars like that anymore. This is a 3-liter engine. We sell beautiful cars, let's say a convertible, like explaining to people how they feel if they drive this convertible Audi on a sunny Sunday afternoon in spring, and they can take the rooftop down and they might feel like a 20-year-old driving through Rome. That's how you sell a car, and that's how we should sell our reward elements as well. This is why you are now invited to participate in the long-term incentives plan, because it allows us to recognize the contribution that you make in creating value for this company. And then at least they understand why they are invited to this, because I think we focus too much on the what it is. You and I probably have explained long-term incentive plans until we had blisters on our tongue, and rarely someone understands the mechanics. So what is TSR? Oh, what's a Monte Carlo simulation? And quite frankly, they shouldn't be even interested in that. And we shouldn't focus on explaining that. We should explain why we have these plans and what we hope it will do for them. And I think that is what we should focus on going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I mean, I think our listeners will understand how much I enjoy talking to you.
Okay.
And I'm sure they have learnt, as I have, a lot more about you in hearing you discussing your experience in reward, which is fascinating. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I've got 2 questions left, and these are my favourite ones. The first of them is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received about reward yourself?
I remember a senior person telling me, you have a problematic role because reward is not important until it is. And that was painful because he said most of the work you'll do will have nobody will notice, but they will if you don't do it right, which I thought was a fascinating statement.
And do you think that's true?
Yes, I think I cannot deny that it is true.
Okay. Next question, and it's the last one. It's the
Oh,
20th of our 20 questions, and it's what's the best piece of advice you've given others about reward?
well, may I break that up in 2 different groups? Because if I talk to people to explain why I think the reward function is so fascinating, my piece of advice is if you want to really understand an organization, if you really want to talk to everybody in the organization at all levels, from all functions, all generations, you have a very limited choice. You can work for audit or you can work in reward. And if I were you, I would not go and work in audit. And I think that is for most people something they've never considered, the fact that you need to understand strategy, you have to talk to all kinds of people in the organization. You will have a consistent learning curve for as long as you'll be in reward. Perhaps you have, but I haven't reached the point yet that I could say I totally figured the whole reward thing out because I haven't. Um,
That's for sure.
and
Yeah.
when I talk to senior people, the only or best advice I gave them is if you're done explaining to me what I should be doing to solve your problem, would you care to take the time to explain to me actually what your challenge or problem is? And then also allow me to come up with some alternatives. And usually, not always, when the reward function is given that trust, more often than not, we come with a better solution. And even sometimes these managers come back to you and say, well, thank you. I think this is a better solution. Not very often, not very frequently. Every now and then you have a manager.
Sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes. Well, that's good. That's good. That's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah,
No.
no, that's really fascinating. And thank you very much, Dennis. I mean, it's been a real pleasure as always talking to you today.
Same here.
And I look
Wonderful
forward to
question.
seeing you very soon. I think we're meeting the evening after next, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So, yeah, Dennis Paalman, thank you very much, and thanks to all of our listeners for listening and also enjoying the conversation that we've had. Thanks very much. All the
Thank you,
best.
sir.
Bye bye.